it's like crazy. When I Google something, I want to learn how to do something, there was like 4 million tools for me to do it. Like, it's crazy the world we live in right now. Like, I was like, I want to make a photograph that does this. And that, like, I was just thinking about the other day, like, anything I want to know, not only is there tools, but there's 4 million people in the world doing free tutorials for me.
That's right.
And I'm like, thank you. Like, whoa. Like,
hey, my name is Ben Charland, and you're listening to What on Earth is Going On? That voice you just heard was Claire Bouvier, my guest this week, who is a professional educator, photographer, musician, designer, and so much more. Claire and I talk about entrepreneurship and creativity in the digital age. We talk about what it means to work with, to live with, and to be creative with ADHD. And of course, we talk about this strange concept of influencers or influencing on the internet, on social media, why it's so important, what it means, what's behind it, and why maybe we should call it something different. Anyways, before we get to that, I want to ask you the favor I always do, which is please spread the word about the show, give it a rating on iTunes or Facebook or whatever podcast app that you use. Tell people about the show and give me your feedback. Send me an email, wogopodcast@gmail.com. That's WOEGO podcast@gmail.com. And just visit the website, wogopodcast.com, for all future and previous episodes and to get in touch. Anyways, here's my conversation with Claire Bouvier. All right, Claire Bouvier, welcome to the program.
thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in spite of all of the technical glitches we had before the show today.
This is supposed to happen.
Well, and you know, I'm glad that you're here because this is the kind of stuff that you deal with as a content creator almost every day.
Yep.
When an equipment piece doesn't work or, you know, a light goes out as you were talking about, this is normal. And this is the kind of problem solving that can lead to creativity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like that is where the greatest things come from, you know, like screwing something up or it not working and being like, okay. And then in that process, you're like, oh my God,
right.
This is way better.
Yeah. I spent a long time working in the theater, and one of the main principles in that business was accept the limitations as spurs to your creativity. When something doesn't go right, or when there's 4 walls that you didn't expect would be there, use those to inspire yourself. Mm-hmm. And I find that, you know, for example, as a writer, it's a lot easier to write something when you know what the parameters are. When you're just given a blank canvas, that can, or no canvas at all and just blankness.
It's actually harder.
It's actually harder, yeah.
I love working with something. Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
Yeah, I just find that when someone says to me, here's what I need from you by this date, go. It's just, you just get it done. And sometimes in that context, done is better than perfect, right?
Done is better than good even.
Right. Which is Elizabeth Gilbert, I think, said that. Is that right?
Yeah. I did a little clip on her and she talks about that. And that really resonated because I think we say good, done is better than perfect, but no, it's not even going to be perfect. Like, you won't get perfect. So that's why I like what she said. Done is better than good. Right. And that means that it's just good enough to pass. It's okay.
Oh, I didn't know that's... So, yeah, I watched that clip, which is where this is coming from. And I didn't know that's what she was getting at. Yeah. I thought it was just a rephrasing of done is better than perfect. And
maybe she didn't explain, but that's how I interpret it.
But that makes a lot of sense.
And I like that because I think we should be striving for perfection. But if we reach a point that it's good, then you have to, tell yourself to move on because oh man, the things that I'm like, you could spend your whole life never accomplishing anything and just obsessing over trying to make it perfect. Right. Time passes and then you're sick of it and then it never went out.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, a lot of people say when it comes to creativity that getting to the first, say, 80% takes up not a lot of time. You kind of just get there really quickly. You do all this work, but then you need to get it to 100% or even 85%. And then every little bit further after 80% is a little bit harder. It's the law of diminishing returns. Yeah.
It's like going up a really steep hill
that gets steeper.
Yes, and the first 80% is you're kind of you got a nice gallop and you're just going and you're like, oh, this is amazing, and then there's something. Well, I think with creatives, the last 20% isn't the creative work. It's the packaging. It's the ship it. One of Rework, I think they talk about that in one of his books, and he talks. That last 20% is really for creatives. It's that administrative burden where you have to package it, make sure you got to go over it, edit it, you got to contact the right people where it's going to be executed, you got to do all the last little finish up the invoice, doing all the things, whatever it is. And it can be, or it's the troubleshooting. You got to the 8%, it's working. And then it doesn't. And then you spend, okay, I've gone this far. I have to figure out why it's not working.
Right.
Fix it. And then,
Well, and know where your goalposts are, right? So that they're not always constantly being moved. Because I think even if you get to 100%, you might decide, well, what's the next step before I'm ready to put this out there?
Yeah. Oh, I've done that so many times. I shoot something, I'm like, oh, this would be so much better on a green screen. And then I'm like, then I'm off buying a green screen and reshooting it. And then I'm like, what am I doing? This is not even, like, this was not the project.
Yeah.
So I like the goalpost idea, concept that you set a mark. This is where you're going to finish. Mm-hmm. And then once you finish, you have to promise yourself that's okay to stop there.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that a bad thing to be worrying about though? Like it's
right.
Because I mean, like I've had other jobs that I'm just like, oh my goodness, I think I cut corners. You do everything you can to finish it. Yeah. But with the creative work, I mean, it's so awesome to have work that you're so consumed by. Right. And you want to keep going, but.
How do you, so you've been, I mean, we're going to get into your biography in a bit, but you do a lot of different things as a sort of a serial entrepreneur, right? Whether it's in fashion or photography, music, you have a very strong online presence. You interview people yourself. You have a hand in a lot of different pots. And I think what you're saying is that ownership is a critical component of creativity, to feel that you own something and that you're possessed by it and that it's moving you forward and it's not just a box you need to check. Obviously, some days it is. We all know what that's like. But how do you keep yourself going? How do you keep yourself invested in that deep and profound way when there are days when it's not doing it for you?
And that's like, let's be honest, anyone that's listening, there are those days that you're just like, you know what? I just watched tape falling off the wall. Literally, everything's a mess. My apartment, dishes everywhere, and I'm looking around. I'm like, I haven't eaten. I can hardly keep my eyes open. I'm like, and you sometimes just take that hit, and you're like, this isn't going to happen today. Yeah. So yeah, I have lots of those days. But those are the days that I learn the most. So when I have a fresh head or fresh anything, the next day I tackle it again, and it's like, it's like tacking in the wind for sailors out there. I'm a terrible sailor, but that feeling when you catch the right wind and you're going and you're sailing. And for me, that's what it is that you have a lot of days that you're kind of bashing your head in a way that's frustrating, but you sleep on it, you give it some time, but you have to force yourself to the time, because sometimes I'll just keep pushing and pushing and realizing this is not happening, and it usually takes someone else coming into the situation and being like, what are you doing? Right. And even it's a phone call and someone's like, I need you right now, and you're like, okay. Or I book things at, like I do things in the evening, so like I have to go to a soccer game, or I have to go, so it's like a stopping point. Right. But then the days that, like to be invested in it, I really just, every type of work that I do, I find myself in it. So I find, even if it seems like a really boring project, I always try and spin it in a way that I can bring a little bit of me into the project. And I'm lucky because I create content. And so if, say someone wants a particular thing and I say, well, have you considered this? And they're like, oh, I like that. And then that allows me to have a little bit of ownership within what they wanted. So at the end of the day, you're delivering what they want, but sometimes they don't always know that there's another perspective to it. So I find that element allows me to get super involved because it's come from me. Right. It's come from something that I've seen. I've been inspired somewhere else. And then I'm like, oh, this client or this person, they could really benefit having like this. Because a lot of times I realize people that aren't, I shouldn't say, they just haven't exercised their creative muscles as much. Sometimes they just want to play it safe. They see what, another business is doing or something. When people want content, they're like, oh, we just want it like this. But I'm like, but why don't we do it like this and spin it a little bit? And that's where I find I get super invested, and it's easy because it's not just a headshot now. Now it's a creative portrait. And we're bringing I make my projects way bigger than they need to be.
Yeah. I'm really glad you bring up earlier other people and how sometimes bringing other people or other things into your life is important, not just to jolt yourself out of it, but to support their creativity too. And I think that the essence there is that creativity is essentially a social art form, that creativity is essentially a social practice, that it requires other people to work. Even if that means you go into a room and you write a poem all by yourself, it isn't a poem until someone else reads it. You know,
exactly. If you have an audience,
right? It's the whole thing about a tree falling in the woods, right? And so the interaction between audience and performer or poet and reader or whatever is what makes something into creative expression. Outside of that, I think we're kind of, locked up in our own rooms and just I'm doing something different from creativity or art. And I'm really glad we're talking about all of this in terms of creativity right at the beginning. And you reminded me of a quote from Michael Crichton, the writer of Jurassic Park.
Okay.
He said
I'm scared to watch the full thing.
What, the full movie Jurassic Park? The original?
I have to skip parts.
What? The original Jurassic Park.
Any of them. Like, I am even the sounds and the soundtrack will make me scared. I don't do scary anything. I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. That's so what part can't you watch? Or do you
literally, like, it's literally just even the opening sound music, it just makes me feel like something bad's gonna happen. Yeah, Jill, let's not talk about scary things today, okay?
No, I didn't intend to, but now that I know, I can bring up a few other scary movies or things.
No, I wouldn't have seen them, so.
Right. I don't like sitting in a movie theater and watching, or on a couch and watching a scary movie. It doesn't give me anything. I like being thrilled.
Really?
I
like thrillers.
I like I think that no story can exist without some sense of danger. But danger doesn't necessarily mean being frightened.
Like horror, that stuff.
Horror or gore or any of that stuff.
I have enough of that in my own imagination. I was like, just getting real deep.
So when you're watching Jurassic Park, does it bring you to your own imagination of dinosaurs or something?
Yeah, I've been living for a long time. No.
I know, you took my segue away, so now I can't.
Sorry,
I don't know how to bring
quote.
us.
No, the quote. No, I'm actually okay.
I'm totally teasing.
No,
okay.
I'm curious.
So here. Okay, so the quote. Well, it's not even really a good segue, but anyways,
it doesn't matter. I'm curious.
The quote is Michael Crichton, who wrote the book, and I have no idea how horrifying. The book might actually not be that scary, but I've never read it.
Okay, maybe I'll tackle that one.
But he says that when you're bored, keep working. When you're interested, keep working. Yeah. When things are going well, keep working. When things are going poorly, keep working. Working begets inspiration, right? It doesn't only act upon inspiration. It creates the inspiration. It's going back to this idea that creativity sometimes requires limitations in order to work. But anyways, that's not a segue at all.
Does he not say a but? He just says keep
working. No, there's no but. There's no but.
I was waiting for a but because I think there's a but.
What's the but?
Like, know when to stop working. Like that's the other thing is that you, like, telling a creative, like, yeah, keep working. Of course, like, it's easy to keep working. It's really hard to stop. That's the danger. And that's where, for me, bringing the mix, like, mental health and taking care of myself, that's when I have to learn to stop, because my, like, mental health will go down. Like, it goes really bad. Everything in my life kind of feels shifted out of focus, Because you invest yourself too much into the work. Yeah, and you forget about taking about the really basic necessities of, like, eating, sleeping, and exercise. Right. And those three things, if I don't have them, then my creativity, for a long time, I thought I could just create until, like, something amazing happens and, something, but it unfortunately, no, I mean, I think most people are like this. You have to eat, sleep. Sure. And I think most people need to eat and sleep. Yeah. Not all. But I meant, like, I look at a lot of people that I really admire and work in different, the film industry or whatever, and I'm like, how do they do it? Like, they're not taking care of themselves. And obviously it only takes you so far. But I realize, I think, for the longevity and for me to create things that I want to, when I'm 20, 30 years from now, I really have to make sure that I have to learn how to stop working.
So how do you do that? Do you respond well to creating a schedule for yourself and making sure, say, like you just said, you got a soccer game in the evening, so you got to stop by a certain time and maybe almost having an alert on your phone? Or do you more respond to having other people bring you out of it? Like, what's your strategy for dealing with that?
It's always moving, but I do CBT and I love it. It's cognitive therapy. So I have ADHD and I have no concept of time. And time has been something like, I thought everyone had the same concept of time.
Right.
They don't. So that was one thing, is like, I don't know when I'm enjoying something. I don't know how long things are going by. When I'm not enjoying it, it feels like it's 4 million years in 1 minute.
Right.
So I actually have to, sometimes I'm good at it, sometimes I'm not. I just ordered a thing that's going to go off in my pocket, not a cell phone, nothing. It's just it'll just vibrate or beep every hour for me to recognize that an hour has passed and to stop, reflect. And I do that. I have other cues in my life for that. But it allows me to recognize where I'm at with my work, what I did in the last hour, and kind of be really conscious of time passing.
Right.
I know it sounds completely ridiculous.
No, not at all.
But I really don't actually know. Sometimes I'm just blown away that 8 hours have gone by and I'm like, what did I do? Then I sit down and I write out what I actually did. I'm like, oh, I did 400 things, but in my head, I didn't realize that. So that's the hourly thing, is the thing I'm really working on right now. And then, I've learned I book things in the middle of the day. So I started taking singing lessons, and that's right in the middle of the day, 1 day a week. I joined a soccer team, so I know between 6 and 10 p.m. every week. That's going to disrupt the workflow that I'm in, and that's a good thing. I also joined an orchestra, and that's on Fridays, which I could really get. I know my Fridays, so that cuts me off at 5:30. Sundays, I go to church, so I know that I have to get to church, and it stops. So every day of the week, I have a disruption that I know is healthy. And it forces me to structure my day around knowing I have to be somewhere at that time.
And this enhances your creativity, would you say?
Yeah, because like an hour sitting in a church, or an hour playing with an orchestra, or an hour on the soccer field, things click in my head. I'm socializing in a different way. And the thing that I'm working on that day, when I'm on the field, or I'm, playing this crazy, weird, accidental line with the orchestra, and I'm like so frustrated, like light bulbs go off. And so when I go back to what I'm working on, everything makes sense. I've kind of like, it's reset my brain and to give it a completely new perspective.
Ernest Hemingway once said that when you go to work for the day, you come with a tank of gas, but at the end of the day, leave a little bit left in the tank. Don't spend yourself completely.
I
so
agree.
then the next day you come back, and some writers even say stop in the middle of a sentence when you're finished for the day and come back and return to the middle of that sentence. Might take you to a new place. You might completely forget what the hell you were doing, but...
that would be so I don't know if I could leave the habit.
But think about it. Think what it forces you to do. What Hemingway was getting at was that your subconscious will keep writing even when you're not sitting or standing at your desk, because Hemingway stood at his desk, right? It'll keep working for you, and you won't even be aware of it when you're on the soccer pitch, when you're in church. I remember for me, I was like 16 or 17, and I was in physics, grade 12 physics. And
I didn't make 1 day of grade 12 physics or calculus, so congratulations.
Thank you. Well, thank you. But I was struggling this one day. Like, I almost didn't make it. I couldn't figure out this one problem. I don't remember anything about it, but I couldn't figure it out. I was banging my head against the table. And I actually put it away, and I thought, I'm not going to get it tonight. I'll have to ask the teacher tomorrow, maybe get marks off on the assignment or whatever. And I woke up the next morning, and in the shower, it just came to me, right? The answer had probably been worked over in my brain in my sleep.
Subconscious.
Yeah, and I find that, that there's those moments in the shower in the morning. I don't know what it is about the shower, but it's all like my dreams and my subconscious come back to me and tell me the answers to things 100%. That I've been working on without knowing it, right? And they come in other aspects too. I'm really, really happy that we're talking about creativity. And this is exactly...
And when to stop creativity.
Which we're going to stop right now. No more creative discussion. No, we're done. We're moving on. No, what I wanted to ask you was the first question that we always ask on the show, which has become question number 37, which is, Claire, what on earth is going on?
Well, You could go in so many different directions, but I think the first thing that comes to my mind is that I'm so excited because the world right now is like 4 million platforms of opportunity. And I can't even believe, like, it's like crazy. When I Google something, I want to learn how to do something, there was like 4 million tools for me to do it. Like, it's crazy the world we live in right now. Like, I was like, I want to make a photograph that does this. And like, I've been learning a little CGI. It's way over my head. But I was just thinking about the other day, like, anything I want to know, not only is there tools, but there's 4 million people in the world doing free tutorials for me.
That's right.
And I'm like, thank you. Like, whoa. Like, and like when there's an opportunity, I was thinking about it. Like, I was buying a font. No, what was I buying? It was something I was downloading. I was actually coming up with a contract, and someone had made one. They're like, if you want to donate. And I'm like, yeah, like this, it's great because you don't get asked all the time, but we live in a world where people are sharing information, and it's really cool. Like, I think if that's one thing the last couple of years I've realized, we're in a world where it hasn't impacted everywhere, but online, there is a world, and yes, people can monetize their sharing. And I think they should, we're taking the education, the classroom into a very global, interesting way where people are sharing their talents, their skills, the things that didn't work for them, that work for them. It's becoming a very transparent world. And then it's also the opposite. Then you look at like Instagram, right? And you can totally manipulate your life to look in a certain way.
Right.
So it's like we have these it's very like this crazy polar opposites where you can create whatever you want, so you can lie to the world if you want to, but then there's a whole other element that I'm so excited about, is that I can learn anything I want. So we're at a point, like, you can do, if you're interested and you're talented enough. Talent does play. You have to have some of the hard and soft skills, obviously, but the opportunities are out there to learn. So it's what on earth is going on is that, like, the world is really providing for people that, didn't have the chance to go to university for whatever reason, or college or whatever. Like, right. It's giving people a platform to learn on. If they have the self-discipline, they can do it. And you don't have to spend money. And I'm not saying, like, I've gone to college and university, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. But I think it's a really cool place that someone like me, I'm not going to go back and get another degree, but I'm going to go on to YouTube and get a YouTube degree, right. and supplement what I already know. Yeah. So I think what's happening right now is fascinating. I mean, you can look at it two ways. Some people see things in a really, a lot of bad things are happening because we're sharing everything, and it's making, but I think, like anything, evolution, like, everything's going to evolve. Right. Everything's going to change. It doesn't matter. So you might as well just jump on with the change and make it work for you in a positive way. Right. Because it's like, we could spend 10 years complaining that, now, businesses are losing out because you can go and buy something online. Okay, so how can we make that work for the local business and the online world? And I think there's a really nice, there's a lot of things that are happening. And I think if we can recognize we're from a smaller city. I wish we could kind of bring that here, is that we could share more within our city. It's interesting because, you talk about change and the fact that change is inevitable. There's the old adage that the only thing that does not change is change itself. You could add to that in the modern context and modernity and say that the only thing that does not change is change and the acceleration of that change, that the change is getting quicker and quicker every day. And I'm really interested in your answer as an educator. You spent some time teaching it was high school, right? Yeah, I was a high school teacher for 7 years. Right, before moving into your current path, right? And so my question is part of that, which is that you say there's like 4 million different platforms that you can learn from and also share too. And for someone who, you just mentioned before that you have ADHD, and that's whoop, part whoop. Of your. It's so I had to make a noise too, right? That's part of it. I realized as I was going whoop whoop, I'm like, oh God, interrupting. No, please, no. But to me, that's what makes these conversations interesting. Is not two monologues, but an exchange and a dialogue, right? Yes. But anyways, someone who has ADHD might struggle with the
being burdened by so much, right?
Yes,
by having so many
different
opportunities. So that's a bit of I guess a two-sided coin or a double-edged sword for you, that there's so much opportunity, but sometimes I imagine it can feel overwhelming.
Oh my goodness, you don't even know. I could cry thinking about yeah. And I think I was saying to a friend, I was like, there's too many options. Like, how do I know? But the one thing I've realized, and something I really like, is that you find really smart, talented people that you trust. And it's a mixture of you doing your proper research, figuring out, but it's kind of like when you go, well, for me, this is how I do it, because I get so overwhelmed with choice and my brain's kind of firing all over the place. When I go into a restaurant, I don't even look at the menu. I mean, I'll look and I'm like, whoa, this is a big one. And then when the server comes over, I'm like, what's your favorite? And anyone that's with me, they're like, Claire, no server likes it. I'm like, yeah, but I'm going to take the risk that some servers like it. And they're like, they look at me and I'm just like, I'm overwhelmed. Just like, what's like the top 3 favorites here? And I look at them and I make my decision on those top 3. And I'm okay that I didn't read anything else. Whereas I have other people in my life that they need to read the entire thing and make a decision for themselves. And that works for them. So that's how I treat life, is that I go to people that I really trust. The server, hopefully she works there. She knows the menu inside out. And most people are pretty excited to tell me what their favorite thing is. Mostly because I'm super excited too. So I treat that the same way in life, is that I go to the people that I really trust and I say, what are your top suggestions for, I want to build a studio right now. So what are the top gear, things that you would, and I ask as many people as I can that I trust. And then I look at it and I make decisions from only the 3 of maybe that there's 2,000 options. I'm okay with accepting that the other, 1,500 or more than that, whatever, 1,800 or whatever it is, that I will never look at and I won't think about, because I'm gonna, and maybe people are like, well, that's naive, but I know for me, I could go down a rabbit hole and I would spend 2 years deciding on gear, and then realizing those 2 years I could have done this much amount of work and then figure it out myself. So what I usually do is I like to have options, but then I find people I trust, and just be like, straight up, you kind of know me. What would you suggest? And then they give a very specific, and that's how I've kind of that's the way that I can get to figuring it out something faster, is that I trust people.
Yeah, I think what you're describing, I mean, your analogy of the restaurant's really interesting, because I think what you're describing is this modern context of the influencer. When in social media, in the digital sphere.
But no, I'm talking a real, the guy that's worked at the camera store for 30 years. That's my influence.
No. But what I'm saying is I think that this applies to the context of the influencer, right?
100%.
So that what are people, when they go online and they're following someone on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, they're looking for people to influence their choices. They're looking for people to influence their decisions in their life, whether it's the things that they buy, the things that they listen to, the things that they know. There are economists who suggest that about 95% of our behavior from day to day is purely about signaling, right? So the reason I'm reading a particular book is to signal to people to whom I'm going to talk about that book the things that I value and the things that I know, right? And so we aren't conscious of this when we do it. We think we just really like a particular book by Michael Crichton, or I don't like horror movies, right? That these are the things that we just think that we prefer. They're our tastes. But actually what many behavioral economists argue, is that actually we're behaving from a much deeper primal place, a much more primally human place, that are in our genes from 200,000 years ago and millions of years before that the reason we consume the things around us, the reason we order certain food or read a certain book, is to signal who we are to our social group. Our social group now being 7.6 billion people, right? These are the people that we can signal ourselves to. And so we need to have input in order to output those signals, right? Now, I don't mean to get too
that's really
academic.
Interesting. No, I love, please.
But the reason I bring it up is to talk about this idea of the influencer, which is this middle person in between the input and the output, right?
There has to be. And now it's finding who's the most, sorry, I cut you off, most authentic influencer. Who's the most genuine, because it's hard. But
authenticity too is a currency that's debatable, right? Because, how authentic can you possibly be when you're communicating to people via a screen or via a podcast, right? So this whole concept of authenticity is interesting. A lot of people would say, for example, and I don't mean to have a conversation about Donald Trump, but that the man is completely dishonest, but totally authentic, right? He may lie, but he does so in a way that seems authentic, which is why when he says, I said would, not wouldn't, or whatever, people can go, yeah, whatever, because he's telling the truth in his own particular authentic way. And I think that's actually not really about him. That's our culture that has changed. But anyways, I wanted to go to this idea as an influencer because I think that is a big part of what you do. And I think that the service that you provide as an entrepreneur, as someone who does these interviews with your Feist series with female entrepreneurs, I think that you're looking to influence people in a very genuine and wholehearted way. But what does this mean? Maybe influencer is kind of a difficult word to use, but what is this and how does it fit within the ecosystem of our culture?
It's funny because I remember long time ago when I first got Twitter. I also don't have Twitter anymore because it wasn't for me. But I remember going to a course. This was like, how long has Twitter been out?
Oh, I think 12 years or something.
Okay,
like
so I was going to say it was like probably
10
10 years ago. I was sitting I took this workshop and they said, it's really important, follow the influencers. And I was like, what does that mean? And then I remember it was like, oh, these are people that that are doing something that you're doing, but they have a much bigger following, essentially. And it's funny because now it's gone to influencers, and now we're in a space where people are realizing we don't know how genuine or how authentic these big influencers are, because companies will spend millions of dollars getting people to say something, and people will take the money. I mean, that's just, so now it's recognizing that's also not really impacting. It's only benefiting now the influencer, because people are like, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one, but I'm wary of trusting that. Whereas that's why I go offline. I call up someone that I know is in the industry and, they're not online. And I'm like, hey, what gear are you using? Or what are you doing? And that's where we've pushed. Online is now pushing to micro influencers. They want people that that have a really strong following just in their community.
Right.
And I think that's where we are, is that people are realizing, there needs to be that intimacy, that you have to build an actual relationship. And it's really hard to measure online. It's really hard because, the biggest thing is that I just wanted, when we talk about influencing, I get asked to do a lot of influencer type of work, and if it aligns with what I'm really passionate about and sharing, my biggest thing is that I think it's really important that as an influencer, I think with the micro influencers, that as you're learning, you should be sharing. And I think for a long time it was like, ask the person that's done it for 20 years, but they forget the little like we talk about the little troubleshooting things along the way. And I rather talk to someone that's kind of halfway there. They're kind of figuring it out. So I don't know if I'm even answering the question all, but the movement of influencers is really interesting because you said there's so much noise. There has to be a middleman that's almost like taking all the information and breaking it down, and that it's digestible for plain English for someone that's whatever looking to get into whatever, buy something, or looking for a service or whatever it is.
Right. Or just helping people to understand a particular product or the world around them, or a guide, a navigator.
And everyone is. And that's why school is amazing. That's why I love school, because every day I would go to class and I would go off and read everything, learn everything, come back in, and you have an expert. They'd be like, okay, they saw a lot more than I did. And so then they narrow your focus of learning and push you. And I think that that's what, at the end of the day, an influencer is just like your high school teacher, maybe, or, your university prof or whatever it was, or, your mentor. And that's what everyone needs. Like, we have so much information, so much talented people, but what we really need is really good teachers.
Right.
And that's why I think it's really important that as I'm learning, I'd be happy to just kind of throw out all my work, but I think it's hilarious. Like, I love showing what's actually happening behind the scenes, because like I was trying to do levitation photography, and like if only people know, like I sat in my apartment with a stool, trying to balance my butt on a stool and not smash my head back. And I'm like bouncing because, you know, with levitation, you want to Photoshop. And I'm laughing so hard. I'm like, if only people, because in the final product was awesome. Like, I loved it. I'm like, people are like, oh, that's so good. I'm like, yeah, but like, you have to also understand the hilarity, like, behind the work that we do. And I think, or like, I was setting up soft boxes for the studio. And I Googled and it's just like, and just do this, pop, 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 and it's ready. And I'm like, no, it's not. You actually have to be a circus performer, contorting your body, putting the things. And I'm laughing. I'm like, that's where there's a disconnect. Is like, I wish there was people more honest about the process that happens behind, you know, and everyone says fake it till you make it. But I don't know. I think to a certain extent, but you also have to share like what's really happening. Because if your final product's good, then, you know, why not share that? And I think that's where influencers, that's our role. That's, you know, if you're at a point that people are looking up to, you know, really talk about what's actually happening once you hit the success or the, you know, find your expert and whatever. And that's why there's a huge movement online is the micro influencers. We don't want someone that has 1 million followers, because you don't know what they're being baited with. Like, that's when it gets that big, you've lost that influencer intimacy.
Well, and there's also something that's constructed about it, that we know that they've built it as opposed to just being themselves, right? And I'm really intrigued by this.
That's why I'm worried about, I don't like the word influence, because I'm like, no, I just like sharing. Like, if I'm learning, I have to share with you what I'm doing.
But in turn, you are therefore influencing. But I think that the more key terminology here is either connect or engage or something in there. Maybe this is what we're really getting at, where this principle is what's key. Where that's why a micro influencer might be more sought after. I remember
they never intended to be,
right.
And
there was a film, like, this is almost 20 years old now, called The Corporation, which is a documentary film about what the corporation has become, what it means in modern society. Being 20 years old, it was quite prophetic because it predicted some of the things that are happening now. But it does feel dated in some ways, but in some other ways, it feels like it's very, very prescient about what's going on. And one thing in the film that happens, which we don't see anymore, or at least maybe it's invisible to us, are people who might walk up to you in a lineup at a McDonald's or just be behind you and talk about a particular product that they really like, or be near you in a mall. And, you know, it's called guerrilla marketing, right? Or invisible marketing. You don't know what's happening, but they're actually selling you something or marketing something to you.
Guerrilla marketing.
And it's more trusted because you think you think that this constructed thing is authentic, that it's appealing to you. Now we see that, but we see it, what that film didn't predict is that we would see that happen in the online digital sphere. We would see people selling things, influencers selling things that we don't know that they're actually being paid for, right? But this is all related to another thing, and it's a little bit of a horror story, but it's not, but there's no, I don't have any scary images of dinosaurs,
don't hear any response, I've
left. So the idea here is that, okay, let's say what people are seeking is empathy and connection. They want to have some kind of authentic relationship, but they're using the platform of Facebook or Twitter or Instagram to get it because that's the way we live our lives now.
Most people, yeah.
Right, so they're seeking these authentic connections through Match.com or Twitter or whatever. But what's going to happen is what if AI does, and it probably will become better at being empathetic humans than humans are, right? What some scholars have predicted will happen is if an artificial intelligence can do these things better than human beings can, that human beings will prefer, if they are aware, the artificially intelligent version of an empathetic human over an actual human being. And that over time, I would rather not talk to human beings anymore because they're cruel and barbaric and stupid and they don't care about me. But the computer, because the computer's good at it and it's designed to do this, is my best friend. It's like the film with Joaquin Phoenix called Her, right?
Yes,
where he falls in love with an operating system because that operating system is actually better at being in love with him than he is. But of course, and spoiler alert, he discovers that the same operating system is, in a relationship with like 500 other people or something. But anyways, I don't mean to bring a scary story into it.
This kind of stuff I love.
Right, and the reason I bring it up is because we're talking about these authentic connections, and I guess it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. What does that mean? What does it mean to have, in an online sphere, what we're doing now is authentic and honest because we're sitting in a room together, we're talking. We may be being recorded, but we can't hide each other. or we can't hide ourselves from each other.
You mean you're not paying me to be here?
No, and nor am I a hologram. I actually exist.
I will test that. He's real. He's real.
So in this room, we have to be honest with each other and authentic and whatever. But on a computer screen or on a phone or whatever, there's almost a different reality that's by definition constructed. So to what extent can we be authentic, empathetic, connected, engaged in that sphere, in that world? Or are we necessarily in a world that's always going to be a little bit artificial?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the latter. Like, there's always going to be, but this is such a tough one because I think back, like for me, just very thinking just of myself, before there was any online platforms, which I actually thought for many years Facebook was a dating site, and I had a ridiculous profile, and it took me a while for people to come up to me like, "You're from Orange County?" and I was like, "Oh crap." I was like, people look at this, and that's when I realized really quickly social media was going to become something more than just me, my funny joke on a dating site. But anyways, like I think back, like as young as I can remember, my violin teacher when I was little, she gave me a deck of cards because that was my big thing. Give me a project. I just need a project. I was always... Weekends and the summer nearly killed me. I cried and cried because school was over. Because I loved going to school. I had projects and I had like deadlines to make. And I found when I was at home, I needed some kind of project that I have to accomplish. And so I remember, she was an amazing, amazing woman. She gave my mom a deck of cards, and my mom would on Saturdays or Sundays, whenever I wanted, pull the deck of cards, close my eyes and grab a card, and it would tell me, today you're going to learn how to do origami. And I wasn't very good. So, but I remember, that, but I got a big stack of origami paper and spent a couple weeks learning that. And I would share with my family, I'd share everyone. I would start making origami for everyone. And then I learned how to, sew or knit. And then these were things my platform was, when I made something, I always needed that a little bit of an audience. Like that was part of when I created something. It was like, I was very competitive with myself. So I'm one of 8 children. So it was like, I always had an audience, which was just who I was. So for my whole life, like all I just wanted is like, oh, Claire, that's so weird. Even if they said that's weird, like, oh, what the heck is that? But I'm like, hee hee. Like, to me, I was like, this is hilarious. And sometimes they make it like, whoa, that's cool. And like, I just loved having people part of my creative process and give me feedback, and I pivot and whatever. So when I after many years, and when I was a teacher, I never posted anything because it wasn't
appropriate.
Well, it just, my world was in the classroom, and that was my world. That was my audience. And being in art and fashion, and I loved it. But then what I realized was when I left and I started realizing, like, oh my gosh, the rest of the world's online sharing their work and stuff. That's when there is, I guess, I don't want to use the word artificial, but I was already sharing my work from the day I can remember, but I just didn't have an online profile, or we didn't have online sharing at all. And then, so now my sharing is just what I'd be sharing with my family, but I have another platform. The platform's online. So it's twofold. When I share, I get more work and get more opportunities. So I have a very, I guess, is it artificial? No, I don't know. There's a purpose. Like, I'm okay not putting it online, but I also recognize that it's allowed me to grow as an artist in a way that when I post something, it's allowing me to, it's kind of like my closure. I post something or put something up and I'm like, okay, I've done it. I never really do anything twice the same way. I mean, to other people it might look similar, but my process is always different. I always learn something in each project. And so when I kind of put it up there, it's kind of my, mailing it, or, it's, no one's telling you have to put it out there, but it's almost like, okay, it's done. Because once it's gone up, it's kind of, that's my deadline. I've created that deadline for myself. And so once that's up, then I'm like, okay, next project. So how do you know, I mean, I'm not answering the question, but knowing something is authentic, I can't imagine I'm the only one like that.
I think you've actually answered the question, and I might, and forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth. In
No,
fact, correct me if I am.
I appreciate when people do that, because sometimes I give a scenario and I'm like, wait, what am I trying to say?
No, here, tell me if this is what you're trying to say. What I'm getting from you is actually kind of a full circle return to the beginning of our conversation about creativity. Your answer to the question of the artificiality of digital world, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, the answer to that is to create. To be creative. And I think that if you're just using these tools to as an extension of yourself, or to kind of dull yourself, or maybe even be in a position of envy of all of these other people who seem to have better lives than you do, when in fact they don't. And we're all struggling through life.
You can't read people. That drives me crazy. You
right.
have no idea.
But it sounds to me like your solution to that problem is creativity, which is what we were talking about at the beginning, to actually create something out of this. So your example with origami seems to me an analogy as to what you do with the internet, that your approach to an online platform is not just to share yourself, but to make something out of it. As if you were approach clay, what would you do with the clay? You'd make something out of the clay, as opposed to just... I want to
do some sculpting. I love sculpting. Yes, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
My next project.
And the next podcast will be, what do you think about sculpting?
No, what do you think of what I made? I'm going to make something.
We'll make something, but that's what I mean. I think your approach to it is a healthy one, and maybe an answer to the problem that a lot of people have in the digital age, which is to create something out of it, to make something out of it, whether it's authentic, quote unquote, or something entirely different. But to create it and to build something out of it, I think maybe is a positive solution. Was that the answer that you were trying to give?
No, I know. I'm not as eloquent as you, and I apologize. No. But I think it's also okay that you don't, I have lots of family members, they don't care to create in the same way, or they create in different ways. This is just work for me, but I think too many people put this pressure on themselves. They have to be online. They have, you don't have to. This is me. This is my personality, and it works. Social media does not cause me any anxiety, stress. I read so many girls posting they feel like they're comparing themselves. They don't, and you know what? I feel for them, but then make the changes that your life doesn't. Just get off social media. Whereas for me, social media, I literally just love following people that I'm like, oh, their work is so cool, I want to try and do that, and I go off and they inspire me. So I find social media, I've made it very, it's another tool of learning for myself.
Right.
So I think if it doesn't do that for you, if it doesn't bring you joy and get you excited, take a break from it. It's okay. I go, I know it sounds like, but I'll go 3 days, and those 3 days, I won't be posting, or sometimes I'm just not, I'm just working on something. And then when I'm done, then I'm happy to share it or whatever. But yeah, I think you just, it's so cliche, but you really just got to know who you are. Know what makes you feel, something for me, I realized something about me. This is terrible to say, but I never respond to voicemails because I never listen to them.
Right.
So I actually deactivated voicemails. I took it off, and people are like, you can't do that. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try it. And I'm in month, I think 8 now. And even all the doctor's office, anyone, they now text me or send me an email just to keep that. And that's eliminated one level of stress in my life that I was like, oh my gosh, when I see they're like, you have 23 missed voicemails, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I can't imagine, it would take everything in me to sit down and listen to all of them and then figure out what I'm going to respond. So I was like, okay, what if I eliminate this channel? And I think that's what our life should be. We have too much option right now, and there's too many places to do everything. Learn what channels are going to work for you. Well,
and it goes back to what we were talking about originally again, which is, whether it's creativity or just the way you live your life, find out what works for you and eliminate the rest. Find your limitations and go with those limitations, as opposed to trying to fill the entire void of the digital world or your social life or whatever, because that's impossible. And done is better than good.
Yes, you know what? It's so true. We put so much pressure, and I'm also at a point, I haven't figured it all out. There are days that I'm a mess. There's times that I'm like, what am I doing with my life? And I think that's the thing, is that people forget. They only see it. Of course, I've chosen that the work that I post online, is positive. You know, maybe some people misread it as artificial, or I've packaged myself in it, but I've just chosen that there's so much negativity that I just want to, you know, I'll be honest about what's happening. Won't go too, I don't want to share everything that, but I'll, like, in moments like this, you know, people that are going to, how many minutes are in, we're still listening, thanks for listening, but if you've made it this far, you know, it's okay that life's so messy and it's hard. Like, I was like, being a human's so hard. Yeah. It's hard. And I think if you have, like, creativity has saved me in so many ways, because if I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm feeling something, I either sit down at a piano or guitar or my violin, or I pull out an image and I make something on my computer, or I go and photograph. Like, I have 10 different kind of creative mediums that I can use, and depending on my mood, I find I gravitate one or the other. Well,
you know, Claire, that's what's refreshing, I think, about your role as an influencer and your persona or your brand on social media, is that it's vulnerable. You're willing to share these stories in order to actually help people through, whether it's ADHD or being stressed or dealing with work. Your web series of interviews with female entrepreneurs is really about asking them to share their story and where things might not have worked for them, as opposed to just waving a flag of how wonderful they are. And I think that works for you really well, which is leading to my final segue. So hopefully this one's clever. No, your interruption is the segue, so go for it. What's the next topic? No, I'm joking. No. Oh. So I didn't lose my train of thought. My segue is that in this position of vulnerability that you create for yourself and allow people in online in the digital space, and how powerful that is. And we talk about you being a micro-influencer. I now need to ask you to promote yourself at the end of the show. And here's why. Because my wife bugs me about this, and she says that, you know, you need to ask your guests at the end of the show about themselves and how people can find them. And I never do it. Because I always get lost in the conversation, and I'm so much more engaged on what on earth is going on. And then the interview's over because we've reached 55 minutes. No, not quite. No, we have a few minutes left. And then I just tack it on at the end of the show, or don't even do that, and I put it on the website. And I miss the opportunity to ask my audience to engage with you further, that this is actually not a closing of the conversation, that this moment now, 50 minutes in, is an opening, a door for future engagement, right? And so here you go. Here's your opportunity. What are you doing next, and how can people find you and connect with you?
Oh my goodness. Okay. What am I doing next?
I know there's 4 million things.
Ask me one medium.
The TV show.
Okay, so I just finished my first TV show with Belle, and as of right now, I've just given them. I was producing the whole thing, so that's a whole nother conversation. It was I learned a lot. So I was producing it and I was hosting it, and that's coming out as of the last little bit. It's been authorized, or whatever the word is, the greenlit.
Okay.
Yeah. That's right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You're the TV producer. I don't know.
I'm like, so it's moving forward. So it's going to be available if you have Fibe TV1.
Okay.
No one's really asked me this. I don't have a TV, so it's kind of funny.
Either.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. But I'm going to figure out a way that in the next little bit I'll be able to share it on my channels. So I'm going to just share it with the world in whatever way I can.
So have a way for people to watch it if they don't have a TV.
Yeah, and I've reached out to things like In-Flight Air Canada and stuff like that to have it, on the airplanes and things like that.
Cool.
Something that's just. There's not too many options when you're flying Air Canada, maybe.
Cool. Yeah. So how can people connect with you otherwise?
Well, they can connect with me. I'm like, don't call me and don't leave a voicemail.
Whatever you do not leave a voicemail. Well, you can't. So
type in Claire Bouvier in one of your platforms that you're using, and hopefully I pop up. That's really horrible, isn't it?
No. Increase your, what do you call it? SEO. So increase your search presence by searching for Claire Bouvier. No, actually, have them search for something that's not you, but then click on you to create that link with Google.
Yeah. That's what I'll do. Yeah, because
search for Jurassic Park.
No.
Scroll down until you get to Claire Bouvier. Click on that, and then you'll create
my reaction.
Then you'll create a link between dinosaurs and Claire.
It's my name, Claire Bouvier, on Facebook or Instagram. And you can find me. And then within my music, the TV stuff, photography, what else? I'm trying to think. All the things that I love to make and create are under my name.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Cool.
I'm also not really helping you in that. I'm like, that's it. ClaireBouvier.com.
No, that's perfect. No, that's what I would. No, that's there we go. ClaireBouvier.com, Instagram, whatever. Okay, cool. So last question then is, what have we missed in this? What do you wish we'd talked about in this conversation that we didn't? Just to leave people wanting more. Scary movies.
Yeah, scary. No, that is. I could do a whole segment on that. I think for the listener, I think that, like, going back to what I was saying, is one thing that I wish, people kind of keep reminding me is that it's okay to not know where you're going. And I think too many times, we set out with too strong of a goal. It needs to become this, or it needs to become that. The one thing I've recognized is that I have to do a lot of pep talks with myself, is just to know that just keep creating, Claire, and just keep sharing it and let it grow in places that it will just reach audiences. It'll resonate with an audience and you don't even know about. But I think if you're just really true to, like, and I'm specifically talking about people that are in any content or any creative medium, is that it's really important to share the work that you're doing. People don't know what you're doing, and I'll tell you right now, they do not go out of their way to ask you, hey, can I see some of the recent projects you're doing? Mm-hmm. I can't believe how many things I haven't shared. And it's just because client protection and privacy, I'm just not there. And then so much time goes by and I forget. I'm like, oh, I'm over it. I don't want to share it. But I'm like, no, I think the biggest thing is that you have to just keep creating and let it kind of, the seeds will drop in the right places where they should. And they'll grow into something and it'll turn into an opportunity. Like, the TV show only came out of someone seeing the stuff that I've been posting. I didn't know her that well, and she's become someone that I really look up to. And she actually wrote them and said, I think you should have Claire as a host for the show. And then that's why they contacted me. So you don't know who you're hitting. It's like a really interesting place. So if you really do something that you're really passionate about, it might take a year, it might take 10 or 20, or it could be overnight. It doesn't matter. Just know that it's going to resonate with someone, and you have to push that. You have to kind of show people what you're capable of doing. I think that's a really, really important piece of advice as we continue to emerge into the digital age, because we still have hang-ups about sharing ourselves and promote, self-promoting, right? We have a lot of hang-ups about this. There's the old adage, if a tree, it's actually the relatively new adage, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no phone to put it on social media, the tree never fell, right? But it's actually the old thing about, it's who you know, and having that be such a bad thing. Well, in the digital era, everyone knows everybody, and it depends on how you present yourself. And whether it's good or bad, that's the world that we live in. I agree. And if people don't know that you exist, then you don't exist in a very real professional, which is very sad. But I think, but unfortunately or fortunately, your advice is critical, I think, for people, especially anyone who is entering into being an entrepreneur, which is becoming a more and more... It's not for everyone. It's so important that if you are someone that is seeking work outside of your city or globally or whatever, you have to be okay with sharing. And I know, are we cutting time?
No, we're not. We're good.
No, I think that's the, share if your end goal is to actually be reaching bigger audiences, is that people wait too long to perfect something, but let people see a little bit of the messy, but make sure, let them see the good, It's done and it's good. It's not perfect.
Some of the greatest art is messy, right? Some of the greatest pieces of art, whether it's music or portraiture or theater, is messy. It's difficult.
Yes.
But that's the point.
Yeah.
Claire, this has been a really wonderful and honestly very fun conversation.
Good.
So thank you so much for coming.
And you didn't make any dinosaur noises. This is good.
Well, no, I'll add those in after in the special effects.
Can I do one dinosaur?
Yeah, go.
No, wait. I used to do...
So if you've never seen Jurassic Park, how do you know how to do that?
Because they're haunting me in my sleep. That's how I used to do start class.
Oh, God.
Yeah. For another episode. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
That's the show. For more about this episode or any other, visit wogopodcast.com. That's WOEGO podcast.com. Your quote of the week is often attributed to Albert Einstein, but it's actually from C.E.M. Joad. The secret to creativity is knowing how to hide your sources. Next week, we've got a great conversation with my friend Alex Slusser about the book The People versus Democracy, Why Our Freedom is in Danger and How to Save It by Yascha Mounk. I hope you tune in. Thanks for listening.